Now, the arm, you're going to have to do a fairly similar thing. It's not going to have its spacing the same way you have the pendulum. Remember how we went and took those keys that were here and middle moused out? You're going to want to do that on the arm. So you can turn the pendulum off for a second, take the topmost control, and you can say, okay, well, I want to take this, middle mouse out, just 2 frames on the very top control. And then go here, go 2 frames to the left, hit the S key, go here, 2 frames to the right, hit the S key, and then here, 2 frames in, and hit the S key. And this is not a huge difference, but it will make the arm swing a little bit snappier, like so. And then, just like we did before, I would also even add finger rotation alongside the arm rotation, but you can really start to go in here. I'll even grab this control so we get the keys. You want to make sure you're at least keying the extremes. You can create a new button just for this one as well. So I'm going to go to 1, I'm going to go to 19, and then I'm going to go to, well, 36. So we'll go here, right on that, hit the S key. So now we have an elbow and a wrist. This is almost a simpler rig, right? Like this one, you know, the pendulum's got 4 controls, really 5, and the arm here really only has 3 for those points of articulation, the elbow and the wrist. Of course, there will be fingers, so you can go ahead and add that stuff in as well, but the same principles apply. So you'll be able to take this and the wrist and say, okay, you know, as this eases out, maybe I want to drag this slightly behind. Now you might be thinking, well, isn't that kind of breaking the rig a little bit? You'd be surprised what you can get away with as you swing your arm. So once we hit this extreme, you know, go a few frames out and say, hey, you know, I want the arm to drag this way. Now, be careful with your wrist. You have to act out what it is you're doing. Your wrist can rotate fairly well in this axis, right? I mean, if you want to try this, I always tell students, like, look at the palm of your hand, basically. Put your hand right out in front of your face and just look at the palm of your hand and wave goodbye to yourself, which is this, you know, goodbye, you know, do that. You have a pretty good range of motion this way. If you want, also, try twisting your wrist. That's going to be this guy right here. You actually have a pretty good range of motion there as well, almost like 180 degrees. But try judo chopping the air, and you'll get this kind of thing. And this is kind of maybe the John Cena thing or something. You know, if you're still looking at the palm of your hand, you're going to get this kind of thing. Just be careful, because you can't do this. Many people, just because Maya lets you do something does not mean that you should do this. Maya lets you kind of bend the wrist this way, and well, you can't. You can't do that. You can do this. You can bend the wrist this way, basically so that the forearm goes pointing right down the thumb. This is, incidentally, what you would generally bend the wrist like if you were holding a sword or something like that. You generally will orient your wrist down slightly. So as the arm is coming up here and going to overlap, you might even want to twist. You can twist the arm and then drag the wrist this way. Or if it's going to drag that way, you can go ahead and do that. So think about your orientation on the wrist as you go forward. So you might even, like on this pose, I might drag the wrist slightly. You'd probably even want to drag the fingers, and you can do all of these things on one pose, believe it or not. You can just go ahead and create this. I would encourage you to think about your fingers, okay? Many people turn in their projects and their hands are in this sort of judo chop neutral position that you know, most rigs are in by default. What you have to do is think about what it is, what is it, rather, that your fingers look like when your hand is at a sort of neutral position. If you want to figure out what that's like, try shaking your hands out, okay? Shake your hands out, set them down at your side, and then freeze your hand for a moment and go, okay, I'm not going to move my fingers. Lift your hand up and look at your hand position. Your hand is going to have something that is akin to what I'm about to show you. You'll see that these channels, when you grab this finger control thing, these are not translation or rotation or scale-based. These are auxiliary channels that allow you to have very specific controls. You'll see that this is index, middle, ring, pinky, curl. Here's how you use it. You don't hit WER. There's nothing in there. You just grab these controls, these channels, just like this. Left mouse click it. Go into your viewport, and middle mouse drag left and right, and you can do some pretty interesting things. So what I'm going to do here is just grab all of these 4 fingers and curl this slightly. I'm going to take the middle and all of this and bring that more, and then take these 2, bring it even further, take the pinky, bring it even further, and you'll get a much more natural hand curl. And you can even take this and say, hey, I want to, maybe bend this a little bit. You can use this, by the way, these fingers are FK chains, just if you're interested in that sort of thing. Make a nice natural hand pose. It doesn't have to be crazy, but, spend a little time there. So back to our shot. You can actually take all of this stuff, and right now I'm on frame 19. I want to make sure I'm not going to grab any geometry here. There we go. Hit the S key. So now you have effectively keyed the fingers. Now, if you wanted to create a quick selection set for all of these controls, you can do that, believe it or not. You can go here to Create, Sets, Quick Select Set. And sometimes you can just be happy and just go right across the keyboard. Sometimes that's fun. Especially in simple scenes where you really only have like 2 buttons anyway. You're not going to get confused, probably. So now we have this. The arm swings back and forth. The wrist is freaking out a little bit. Don't worry about that right now. But what I want you to look at is the fingers, because now that will carry into all of your animation. You get this nice drag right there. But if you do notice your wrist freaking out like this, here's what you do. Grab this, go to your graph editor. In the graph, you're going to look at your rotations, because that's actually what's causing this problem. So let's go ahead and check that out. Grab all 3 of these, and you'll notice that the math, let's say, the rotations are going pretty straightforward, pretty straightforward, pretty straightforward, and then it's like, whoa, there's a divergence that happens here. So mathematically, there's actually a way that you can reorient the math, and it just flips the character back to what it's supposed to be. So sometimes this will happen to you, especially in FK, this will happen, but it does happen in IK as well a little bit. Go right down here to the Euler filter, or what some people call the Euler filter. I don't know why. It's a mathematician, basically. But if you go ahead and hit this, it figures out that math for you, and it removes that weirdness that we were just seeing there, which is kind of cool, because now we have all we need to create that overlap we were looking for. So maybe here, maybe you want to start to twist the wrist a little bit. Maybe you want to drag it a little bit more as the arm hits that extreme, swoops through, hits that extreme, swings back the other way, and then comes back like so. So how you get through these poses is really how you get that nice overlap that you're looking for. So, maybe this pose here, maybe you want this to drag a bit more. Maybe you want this to kind of fully extend, or even hyperextend beyond. Believe me, you can get away with these things when you hit play. You'd be surprised at what you can get away with. So actually what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take both of these controls. Check this out. I'm going to take this and have it so it arrives a little sooner, and then it's going to float through that action. So as you can see, there's different ways of creating your overlap and different ways of attacking it. And when you're ready, you'll be able to take this and say, hey, I would like to see what that looks like. So, no, actually, like that. So right now, as I look at this, as it swings through there, see how it kind of stalls a bit too much? That means that you can actually go through your main control and say, hey, you know what? Maybe that stall is a bit too strong. So just like we did earlier, you can take these and say, hey, I just want to pull them in a little bit so they aren't so extreme. It's the same thing, by the way. I want you to understand that. Like the spacing, on this rig, it will just show you the curves there, but that's why the ghosting thing isn't always perfect. But you can see that the spacing through the middle is still stronger, and as you hit the extremes, it's a bit tighter. So that's the most important takeaway there. But through the middle, you can definitely get away with, dragging these objects a little bit further. And then even as you hit this, you can go right through. And even think about your elbow and wrist as you hit this extreme. Remember how on the pendulum we said, okay, the object at rest tends to stay at rest. It's going to want to point back to where it's coming from. So you might actually bend that elbow a little bit more as it swings up and then through. Now the wrist. Maybe here, we might want this pose to be a little sooner, so it has some place to go. Like that. And you can play around with this stuff. And of course, for your fingers, just so you know, this main control right here will give you the baseline sort of curls for the fingers. You can add overlap there as well. So like right in the beginning, just hit the S key. Right at the end there, hit the S key so you have some placeholder keys. And then you can add some overlap. Remember, you want the first and last keys to be the same if you're creating a loop. But as the fingers drag behind, you might want to curl these a little bit more. Maybe you want to close the hand slightly. And then as it hits this extreme, maybe the hands will unfurl slightly. And maybe even here, like you might even extend them a little bit past. And then they curl back. So play around with those things. You can see what you can get away with. The main takeaway for this, though, is not just spacing, but also getting that smoothness that we're looking for. So thank you for watching. Hopefully this exercise will give you at least a benchmark to start realizing the simple stuff that we've been doing up to now actually does carry into more complex actions. So take this into your posing, because as it comes down to well, every animation basically is only as good as your weakest pose. So you'll take this stuff. This is important when it comes to animating a character in general, but adding that extra overlap, understanding the spacing, and how you can manipulate space and time is really, that's really what makes animators, magicians, the magicians that we are.